the remote village of Windermere, nestled between gloomy moorlands and ghostly woods, there stood an ancient ruin, a relic known as Whistlewood Manor. Its stones whispered secrets of centuries gone by, shrouded in tales of sorrow and malice. Villagers spoke of it only in hushed tones, their eyes casting furtive glances towards the shadowy silhouette on the horizon. On a cold autumn night, when the wind howled like a banshee, a storyteller known as Old Magnus gathered a group of attentive listeners at the village inn. The flickering light from the hearth cast eerie shadows on the creaking walls, and a bottle of whiskey did little to warm their bones. Leaning forward, Magnus spoke in a voice that hummed like distant thunder. Few dare to venture near Whistlewood Manor. Those who do are never quite the same when they return, if they return at all. Old Magnus paused, letting the somber weight of his words settle over the crowd like a fog creeping over the moors. But there was one, he continued, who was brazen enough to heed not the warnings inscribed in the very air that surrounds the manor. Her name was Eliza Treadwell, a spirited girl with burning curiosity. She had heard the tales, of course. Who hadn't? But instead of fear, they ignited an unquenchable thirst within her. She had to know the truth. The listeners sat transfixed, their imaginations firing on the tantalizing mix of dread and intrigue that Magnus communicated with every syllable. He sipped his drink, savoring its warmth like a silent pact before delving back into his tale. Eliza arrived on the moors alone, the autumn leaves crunching beneath her boots like the brittle bones of forgotten souls. She soon found herself before the manor's gates, twisted iron scarred by years of neglect. With a deep breath, she steeled her resolve and crossed the threshold. Wind howled through the skeletal trees, a symphony composed by the restless spirits of the past. Eliza pushed the great oak door, its groan echoing through the darkened halls like a garbled welcome. The air inside was dense, saturated with the sense of decay and ancient gloom. Magnus leaned back in his chair, the flames of the hearth painting his face in flickering amber hues. Eliza, he said, heard the stories of lament and anger tied to the manor, a tale of betrayal between brothers, one who had stolen the other's beloved and with it the other's very soul. Inside the manor, a relentless air of melancholy weighed upon her, constricting her breath and fogging her senses. Despite the oppressive aura, Eliza was determined to explore its sinister beauty. She wandered through musty corridors and time-worn rooms, the ghostly whispers of the past claiming the very air she breathed. But then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a piano, its keys plucked one by one, weaving a haunting melody that danced like shadows. She followed the ethereal notes up the grand stairway and through a doorway draped in cobwebs, to a ballroom long deserted by the joy of dancing feet. There across the room stood the piano, untouched by hands but pulsating with the resonance of an age-old dirge. It was then that the room began to pulse with a spectral light, revealing an apparition, a figure of elegant poise, a graceful woman in a gown of mist, an echo of beauty trapped in the sorrow of memory. "Who are you?" Eliza breathed, her voice trembling like the trembling air. The spectral figure turned, and for a moment, the anguish in her eyes crossed the chasm of time. Her lips moved, and though no sound came forth, Eliza understood with chilling clarity. The woman motioned towards the grand windows of the ballroom, indicating a grave secret hidden beneath the earth. An overwhelming urge gripped Eliza, a conviction to uncover the hidden truth the spirit yearned to reveal. Heart pounding, she tread to the ground beneath the manor, an old cellar buried in dust and echoes. There she found the crumbled remains of what was once someone's sanctuary, amidst which lay an ornate box, locked but demanding the trust of her hands. With a rusted piece of iron, she pried open the box, revealing stacks of parchment, letters stained with dried tears. They told of forbidden love and sealed fates, chronicles of betrayal etched by hearts divided by duty and passion. As she pieced together the old riddle, the air grew colder, a veil parting to reveal the despair entombed in solitude. At that moment, understanding flooded her being. The letters spoke of a night long ago when one brother, driven by jealousy, had sealed away his rival's beloved, the very spirit who now haunted the manor, in an attempt to erase a passion he could never reignite. Eliza knew she could not linger. Grasping the letters as if they were the final testament of the tortured soul, she ascended from the darkness, the manor trembling as though shook by the anger of untamed spirits. With the break of dawn, the mist lifted, and Eliza emerged, enlightenment bridging the chasm of time and laying the spectre's torment to rest. As old Magnus concluded his tale, the fire in the hearth sputtered, and in the silence of the final break, each listener felt the chill of spectral fingers dance along their spine. "Whistlewood Manor, now quiet at last," Magnus murmured, "where the crumbling stones stand as silent witnesses to love's vengeance undone by the unwritten justice of compassion." The night wrapped the village in its somber embrace, the winds carrying whispers of stories yet untold, leaving the inn awash with the silent promise of dawn. In the small, forgotten town of Ravenswood, nestled between shadowy forests and misty hills, stood an ancient mansion that had witnessed the passage of countless years. Rumor had it, the estate was cursed, a whisper among the townsfolk that dared not to be spoken loud enough for the wind to hear. Those who ventured too close were said to have returned changed, speaking in hushed tones of things best left in the dark. The estate belonged to the Eldridge family, whose lineage had withered over generations until only Josephine Eldridge remained. A shrewd and reclusive figure, her presence was rarely felt outside the mansion. However, the town speculated about strange lights flickering behind frosted windows and ghostly shadows moving within the dusty corridors. "They say she has the sight," locals claimed in whispered exchanges over evening fires, their eyes darting to ensure Josephine could not hear them. One chill autumn evening, a young scholar named Thomas Ward arrived in Ravenswood. His arrival sparked curiosity, for he had taken an interest in the folklore surrounding the Eldridge estate and sought to unravel the mysteries entwined with its history. Disregarding warnings from wary villagers, Thomas resolved to visit the mansion despite the ominous tales. Ahead loomed the manor, its Gothic architecture casting long shadows that danced grotesquely upon the untamed grounds. Thomas felt an inexplicable chill as he approached, the air colder here than it seemed in the village. Summoning his courage, Thomas knocked on the heavy oak door, and it creaked open under his hand. The interior was suffused with a strange, sallow luminescence, as though the walls themselves glowed with an eerie memory of times long past. With reluctant fascination, Thomas stepped inside, the door groaning its discontent as it swung shut behind him. He called out into the cavernous silence, "Hello, Miss Eldridge." His voice reverberated, swallowed by the oppressive quiet. Receiving no reply, Thomas ventured further, each step a discordant echo in the grand hallway. His eyes caught glimpses of portraits hanging in the gloom, somber figures with eyes that seemed alive, following his every movement. Shivering, he averted his gaze, only to feel inexplicable heaviness drawing him upwards, towards the attic. Compelled by a force he could not articulate, Thomas climbed the narrow staircase, the wooden boards sighing beneath his weight. At the top, he found a door slightly ajar, a chilling draft seeping through the crack, carrying with it a malevolent whisper. "Return. Return." His heart thudding in his chest, Thomas pushed the door open. The attic loomed before him, shadows swirling relentlessly, a dance macabre. In the center stood an ornate mirror, tarnished with age, its surface reflecting something not of this world. Before Thomas could react, the shadows coalesced, revealing the figure of Josephine Eldridge. Her eyes shone with an unnatural light, pupils expanding until they consumed the irises. "You've come to seek the truth," she intoned, her voice resonating with an ancient power. Thomas found himself unable to look away, ensnared by a force more potent than mere curiosity. Yet within him, curiosity battled fear for supremacy. "What is this place?" he managed to ask, his voice thin and wavering. Josephine gestured to the mirror, and within its depths, nightmarish images played out, visions of victims claimed by the house, their faces twisted in silent screams. Thomas swallowed hard as realization surged through him like a cold tide. This house, she continued, was born from darkness. It sees, it knows, and it will not rest until it consumes every soul within its grasp. A sinister rumbling echoed through the attic, and the air grew thick with shadows, plunging the room into a suffocating gloom. Thomas felt darkness clawing at the edges of his vision, promising an eternity of torment. Panic gripped him, and he staggered back, breaking free from Josephine's unyielding gaze. Harnessing every ounce of will, he stumbled towards the door, struggling against the sinister gravitational pull of the mirror. He dashed down the stairs, the house trembling with fury around him, snarling its disapproval through cracking walls and groaning timbers. Reaching the door, he flung it open and burst into the night, breathless and wild-eyed. Beyond the threshold, the air was sweet with freedom, a stark contrast to the house's pulsing malevolence. He didn't dare look back, fleeing until the night's chill burned the lesson of fear into his bones. When the townsfolk found him the next day, slumped in a hollow-eyed sleep beneath the remnants of fog, they knew. They knew that once again the house's shadow had touched someone, leaving behind an indelible mark, a tale of horrors unspoken but nonetheless understood. The Eldridge estate stood silent, basking in its triumph, awaiting the next intruder who would step into its grasp, ready to join the dance of shadows in the attic beyond the edges of sanity.